comes from Luke chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. And it's found on page 58 in your New Testament if you'd like to follow along. Hear the good news for this day. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to Jesus, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." Jesus said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem." Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you. And I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." This is our good news for this day. Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Grace and peace to you from God, our Creator, and our Savior and friend, Jesus Christ. Amen. Ever wish you hadn't done a Google search? Wish you hadn't looked something up on the internet? Usually for us, it involves our kids are sick in one way or another, and so we Google it. And so, of course, you find they have some incredibly rare, terrible disease. As an example, the other day, Asher said his stomach hurts. And we happened to look at his belly button, and his belly button was a little bit red. So we thought, we'll Google it. So, of course, the Google tells us that he must have appendicitis. Now, we have done this a few times, Googling an illness, and so we thought, let's give it a day before we rush him to the ER and just have them blindly take out his appendix. And miracle upon miracle, that next day he was fine. But I bring up this Google search because I did one for this sermon and I regretted every second of it. The Pharisees brought up Herod to Jesus. "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." And reading that, I thought I remembered that Herod died much earlier than Jesus coming into adulthood. So I simply Googled, what happened to Herod? And reading an article put together by ABC News, of all places, I immediately wished I had Googled. Turns out Herod was not a nice guy. And he died a terrible, perhaps the worst death I've ever heard of. Aren't you glad he came this Sunday? I'm not going to detail the full article for you, but I'm going to give you some of the highlights, or in this case, lowlights. Josephus, a Jewish historian, recorded about King Herod's life, saying that Herod was a productive, successful builder in his youth who became increasingly paranoid and ruthless during the final decade of his 36-year reign. And you hear that and you think, well, that's not unusual. That's what we know about kings with power for a long time. They end up being a little bit more tyrannical. But he's got more dark parts than usual. Herod's main problem, according to all the people that write about his life, is that he married too many times and had too many children. And every single one of those children wanted to be numero uno. They wanted to be the future king. This led Herod the Great to eventually killing 3 of his sons from his 10 wives. When the brother of his favorite wife, Mariamne, roused his suspicion, he invited him over to his house to play a game of polo. And then they drowned him. Herod ordered the killing of Mariamne's grandfather, and finally, suspecting Mariamne had betrayed him, he killed his most beloved wife. Herod is probably most notorious for the massacre of the innocents as described in our Gospel of Matthew. Also, don't Google Massacre of the Innocents. The paintings on it are not great to look at. But the story goes in the Gospel of Matthew that when hearing that a new king of the Jews had been born in Judea, Herod ordered the killing of all male infants in Bethlehem aged 2 years or younger. And then in addition to that, when Herod learned that his own death was imminent, he ordered his sister to assemble all of the leading men of distinction from all parts of his nation into a large arena and then ordered them killed upon his death. Nice guy, right? But here comes the part that I wish I hadn't Googled. Herod's death. It was painful. At the age of 69, he died of a kidney disease that led to him having maggot-infested gangrene in an area described by his doctors as his privy parts. There are probably worse ways to go than that, but I, for the life of me, can't think of one. He did finally die after all of his tyranny in a truly terrible way, and he died in the year 4 BC. You heard that right. Now we normally say BC is what? Before Christ. And here he died in 4 BC. One of my favorite lines from The Life of Brian by Monty Python that I tell people about all the time is it's a deleted scene. Shepherds are sitting around and they look at each other. They're supposedly waiting for the birth of Jesus, and they look over and he says, "Is it AD yet?" But here, you have, because of the massacre of the innocents, and because of certain celestial events, because we think that a new star was born in the sky, we normally date Jesus' actual birth at 5 BC, which would make our reading even more impressive to think that an at most 2-year-old Jesus said, "Go and tell that fox for me, listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the 3rd day I finish my work." That is an impressive 2-year-old. All of you were slackers. But in all honesty, what are we supposed to do with this? I am in no way, shape, or form saying we should get rid of this gospel passage. Knowing when Herod actually died and when this story most likely takes place does not even come close to discrediting it. And let me start out with the simplest reason why. People in that time period did not understand death. Until we were eventually able to scan particular parts of the brain, we didn't necessarily understand when someone else died. Even if we think we understand it, we might still not understand death today. Ever heard the phrase "saved by the bell"? It is not an original reference to an early 90s TV show. It's also not a reference to boxing, where you're about to be knocked out and they ring the bell and you're saved by the bell. Its true origin is that over and over again, people in ancient times accidentally buried people that were in comas. And so in order to rectify that horrible situation, you can still see this in some old cemeteries. There's a little bell attached to the tombstone, and a string runs down into the casket. So if you found yourself suddenly waking up in a box and there's a string next to it, you shake that thing like crazy and you're saved by the bell. Just because an evil tyrant is dead in that time period does not mean that he would stay dead. There are many who believe that parts of the book of Revelation was about a fear that the evil Emperor Nero, the one that persecuted early Christians, that he would return from the dead. With a little bit of work, you can make the number 666 spell out Nero. That name, Nero, as if he is that evil beast. There was even a cult that was awaiting the return of that thought dead, evil Nero. Now, was there a similar group, a similar cult for King Herod in that time period? I don't know. Was that a threat thrown out in those days? Like, the boogeyman is going to get you. King Herod is going to come and get you. Also, don't do a Google search for the boogeyman. I'm not going to sleep well for a little while. But I do know that Jesus' response is perfect, whether Herod is alive, back from the dead, or a boogeyman that people use to scare one another. Jesus said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you." Jesus responds more to the Pharisees than Herod. "How long have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings?" That's not Herod. Jesus is recognizing the threat, but whether it's Herod or the Pharisees, it's the same exact threat, and Jesus treats it the same way. This week, we're looking at social interpersonal well-being. And I initially kept our gospel reading for today because I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny to tell you to get better, more well at your social interpersonal relationships, with Jesus immediately saying, "Go and tell that fox." I just thought that was funny. When I first read it, I laughed to myself and I said, we have to have that. But then the more I read it, the more I studied it, I realized just how truly perfect it was. Not all of our relationships are healthy. That's just something that needs to be said. That doesn't mean we shouldn't love all people, try to help all people, but we all know at least one couple or one or two people, when they get together, things are just explosive. And we think, maybe they should spend a little bit of time apart. We all know those people. But even more than that, there are those voices in our lives that don't give us the best advice. What are the Pharisees telling Jesus? Go find safety because the boogeyman is about to get you. What lie do we tell ourselves? You can make yourself perfectly safe. If you build walls up high enough, if you pile up enough stuff, you can make yourself safe. And what does Jesus say to that? I don't have time for your illusions. Your illusions of an enemy, your illusions of helping, your illusions of safety. I've got work to do. And then Jesus concludes with maybe the best part. And I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Think about that. He says to these people that are maybe not giving him the best advice, they're trying to lead him down the wrong path, you won't see me again until I can bring blessings into your life. Is that not a model for dealing with those voices that would trap us, be they real or illusions, be they people or ideas of people? Be honest, be direct, but don't live the lie. Don't live a life less than the one you are called to live, because you're not doing any good to yourself or to them by doing that. But here's the other side. Never give up on people. Jesus didn't give up on the Pharisees. He didn't give up on evil King Herod. Jesus dreamed of a day when he could return to them as a blessing. The message for us on this day is simple. Go and do likewise. Amen.